Well, good afternoon, and welcome to Alabama. Those of you that are out of the area. My name is Tony Ramos. I'm from Fresno, California. Grew up on a dairy. Subsequently went into cotton farming because cows and I didn't get along too well. I've been asked to come and speak about my experience with Old Red out here. And this is a story about a 16-year-old boy that went to work at Allied Equipment in Fresno, tickled to death to work with the mechanics that I idolized, and I had no idea what I was working on. I had just turned 16. I had just gotten a car. I had just gotten a steady girlfriend, and my dad had bought a used 220 two-row cotton picker. And my dad was the dairyman. I didn't want the cows. And of course, I was pretty young. And he says, well, you want this darn cotton? You go over there. And what the program that Allied had was, if you bought a cotton picker from them, especially a two-row, it was so new to the industry that they wanted the growers to come in and work in the picker department so they'd get acquainted with it so they wouldn't have so many service calls during the season. So I go in, and John Preacham was the service manager, cotton picker service manager. And he already knew me from, we had a 55W hay baler, we had an old farm all age, and that sort of stuff. So I had already gotten acquainted with some of the mechanics. And he kind of took me under his wing, and he gave me a pair of coveralls with the Allied logo in the back. And man, did I think I was some tall cotton. So he takes me to this one-row cotton picker, and he begins to tell me the history. And he says, Tony, this was the first. I thought he said the first cotton picker, commercial cotton picker, sold to the San Joaquin Valley. However, in the picture on the sign it says the first commercial cotton picker sold in the nation. And I didn't hear that. He says, we're going to restore that. We're going to restore this. And Producers Cotton Oil bought it. And they're going to donate it to the Smithsonian Institute. Do you know what this 15-year-old heard? I heard we got a junk cotton picker over here, it doesn't run. And we're going to work on this thing. And it's going to go somewhere back east, I don't know where. And it's going to a museum, and that's only where old people go to look at old junk. And for years, that was my history with that picker. I loved working on it. Had no idea the historic value of that machine. As time went on, in 1978, I was elected to the Production Credit Board. And just in time for the 80s. I'm sure your older fellows remember the 80s. We don't want to remember the 80s, but nevertheless, I was on the board at that time, and we came back to Washington, D.C. to walk the halls of Congress, see if we could lobby for the farmer. One afternoon, we had a free afternoon, and someone on the board said, hey, we need to go to building such and such over here at the Smithsonian. There's farm displays. So off I went, and I'm walking along with my wife down the aisle, and I said, you know what? When I was in high school, I worked at Allied Equipment, and supposedly there was a cotton picker that was going to be donated to Smithsonian. And about that time, I could see the red basket. And I walked up to it, and there was that machine and that same sign hanging over the rear tire. I looked at it and I go, holy smokes. But this was the 80s. We had bigger fish to fry. We needed to survive. So I came home and forgot about it. Time went on because I started with IH, but my dad died when I was 19. Just shy of 20. And at the same time, Allied Equipment went on, sold out. And the company that bought it was a little flaky, so all their mechanics and parts guys fled and went to the John Deere dealer. So I farmed with, my career I farmed with John Deere. Fast forward to in my 60s, I started getting nostalgic, and where did I go? I went back to my IH roots. I've got John Deere's. I basically retired last year from farming. Still got 20 acres, but I got John Deere's that were special to me, but they're not restored. People ask me why don't you restore them? I just don't have it in the gut. It says those internationals make me feel a little different. They're pretty special. So, how I got into restoring IH again at an older age was, we blame RFD-TV, Max Armstrong, Rodney and Jan, and classic tractor fever. So Carol and I, we'd had dinner, and I'm watching Classic Tractor, and here comes this Farmall H around the corner, and I made the comment, gee, my dad gave me one of those when I was about 12. It was shot, piece of junk, but he said, here's your Farmall H, go rake hay with it. That was the best thing he ever did. I learned so much on that tractor. I've got a scar on my hand. I have to tell you that this 12-year-old learned how to check spark plugs with a screwdriver and not a hitch pin. The tractor missed from day one, and I couldn't figure out how come my Farmall always had a toot to it, and the neighbor's Farmall always had a specific silver sound to it. So I had my mother take me to Allied Equipment. I was about 12, and Ray Alexander was the parts man. I'll never forget it. I could barely see over the counter. I said, I got a Farmall H, and it goes toot, toot, toot. What can I do? And he goes, well, young man, you obviously you might need spark plugs or a tune-up. And I go, well, how do I know? And he says, well, my recommendation is go home, get a big screwdriver, and put it on the wire and see if you got a spark, and see if the noise changes on that specific cylinder. So I came home all excited. My dad wasn't around. And I went out in the barn, back to the HL, looked for a screwdriver, couldn't find it. There was a great big hitch pin. And I said, well, let's use this. And I put it up there and threw my hand up, and I still got the scar here from hitting the hood. So I started learning my mechanics on that little Farmall H. But fast forward to what I was saying. So we're watching this, and the Farmall H comes around the corner, and I told Carol, I said, Scott, I haven't seen a Farmall H in decades around Fresno, California. And she goes, well, why does that mean, and I told her the story, and she said, why don't you get one? I go, nah, I don't have time for that. 2 months later, I had the Antique Power magazine, and I find an ad for a Farmall H in there exactly like the one I had. And it wasn't 2 weeks later, it was in Fresno. That started my itch for restoring. Well, out there isn't very many restorers. And so where do I go for information? Well, I subscribed to Red Power magazine, started reading that. I knew nothing about computers. I tried to shun computers up until that point. So these old tractors are good for a lot of things, not just for our entertainment, but the old tractors got me involved with computers also. Next thing I know, I'm on Red Power. And I joined Red Power July 7th of 2007. I'm sorry, July 4th of 2007. Start reading about guys like Smoker, Old Max, and it was a little while later, probably a year or two into it, Danny Anderson, and there was a T-bone on there, and I'm wondering, who is this T-bone? And next thing I know, I'm looking at these guys, and they all know what they're doing, and my mouth's open, and I'm saying, holy smokes, how in the heck am I ever going to do this? Well, that was the start. Got to know these fellows, start coming to Red Power roundups, and here I am. Today, I have 14 restored tractors. I have a 55 WA baler. I have a 66 International pickup that I just went through a 3-year restoration on, and I have a 66 one-ton International pickup that I saw our local blacksmith purchase and build a bed on it right after my dad died, when I was starting a farm or take care of the ranch on my own. And I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, and my mouth watered over that pickup. And he passed away, gave it to his grandson. His grandson wanted to sell it. I have it in my shed. I hope to restore it one day. So in this process of learning to restore and associating with these fellows that were already restoring from years back, I came across a picture on Red Power from the Historical Society. And it was this picture. It was black and white. And so I called the Historical Society and I talked to the lady, and I asked her about it, and I told her the story. And I says, may I have the picture? And she says, well, what are you going to do with it? And of course, I had to do all the signature work and all that I wouldn't promote it. It was for my own use. So I purchased that picture, and it hangs in my shop. I made a mistake of telling Randy about this 2 years ago in the Red Power, and that's why I'm up here. He didn't let go of it. He put me to work. Now I'm 72. At 72, I realized what a significant piece of history that picker was. And I had the privilege to work on it, and not knowing, not ever envisioning the historical significance of that machine. I didn't tell you what I went through working on this. You talk about learning and being the grunt man. So John says, okay, we're going to pull bars out. So I worked on it several days, pulling bars out. He had a rack with wheels on it. We put the bars on it. And he says, okay, out in the alley we have a steam cleaner, and your job is to steam clean those bars. Well, I was 16, I'd never used a steam cleaner. I thought this was great. He gives me an apron, I put it on. In those days, there was no OSHA. You just went out there and you survived on your own. Well, I saw why he gave me the apron. By the end of the day, I was just loaded with grease. If you know a cotton picker bar, they're greased every day down the bar, so it lubricates the gear and the spindle. Plus, they also have, the older ones had oil drippers on them to keep those gears lubricated as the picker was going. So, you talk about grease, dirt. They're filthy when you're steam cleaning. And I went home and I had to shower twice to get the grease off. That wasn't the worst. So we got that process done. We come back and he says, okay, now you have to press the spindles off the nuts. Fine. I'm thinking we got a little power tool. No, it was a hand press. There's on a single row high drum, there's just shy of 1,000 spindles on one head. And so there I sat with the press, pressing each spindle out. The nuts went in one bucket, the spindles went in another. Okay, we finished that process, and he says, well, Tony, I'm going to teach you how to candle spindles. Now, I meant to ask somebody out here that knows the modern pickers if they still handle spindles or how they do it. But what handling spindles was they've got barbs on them. So they put you in a little cylindrical room, dark room, with a projector in the back, or a projector screen in the back, and a projector up front. And it's probably 10, 12 feet from the screen. And he brings in a bucket of spindles and he puts it here. And he brings a chair and he puts 2 buckets on the other side. I'm thinking, what do I do with these buckets? He goes, Tony, here you go. I'm going to turn the light off. You take each one of these spindles, you put it in the projector. If the barbs are over the line, you put them in that bucket. If they're under the line, you put them in this bucket. And there I sat all day long in the dark, handling 1,000 spindles, one by one by one by one. So those were the experiences I got. That's the way we worked on these old pickers back then. Today, they have automated shops, and I'm sure the spindles are not handled one by one. Also in that process of working on that picker, this would have been late 63, early 64. I got to help detail the first 806 diesel to hit Allied Equipment sales force. And a mechanic I had taken to, his name was Mel Hansen. He was in charge of preparing the 806, and I asked him if I could help him. And so I got to run the rag over the tractor, and it broke my heart because I wanted one of those so bad. Knew we could never afford it. But this tractor it was sold to an outfit in Madera, California by the name of Melville E. Wilson. They were a fertilizer applicator outfit, and I knew that tractor was going to be one of many, and it was going to come back looking pretty shabby. But nevertheless, the first 806 to hit Fresno, I got to help detail it out. When my dad died, we went into a probate. It was a 7-year probate. We thought we were going to lose everything. I had, out of 4 siblings, I was the oldest. And we fought like heck to hang on. And now I had to make the decisions. And Allied had sold out equipment, had a lot of the equipment. Mechanics and people I knew had fled to John Deere. So now I had to make a decision, and my heart was with International, but I wound up buying 4020s and 40 Orchard John Deere tractors, etc. And like I said, I farmed my career with John Deere. At this point, what I would like to do is, I've got some pictures here of my early years in farming, not the ones with the Internationals per se, because when I was growing up, and my dad was in the process of selling a dairy and buying International equipment, my mother only took pictures of Christmas and Thanksgiving. Nobody thought of going out and taking pictures of the cow corrals and tractors and all the rest of that. And then, after he died, the 7-year probate, all I could think of was trying to save the ranch and help my mother and siblings. So these pictures were taken. I started to farm on my own in '67. I farmed under the estate until 1973. In '73, I started to lease, I bought all the equipment that was in the estate, and I started to lease the land, subsequently buying it from my brothers and my mother. And so these pictures are from '73 on. Of course, our first cotton picker was an MH20, 120H, and it was an M high chrome with the axle drops, etc. In 1980, prior to 1980, I'd been using a 184 International cotton planter, 4-row. Loved that thing, it was great. But the experts had come out with precision planting, and we were going to do away with cotton chopping, and we wanted to plant the crop every 6 inches. I should have bought a number 50, I think it was 56 International, but instead I bought a number 51 John Deere. I farmed with it for many years, but I never liked that planter. I always wished I had not sold the 184 at that time. Those trailers in the back, of course I was young and starting out, and that was the year I decided to paint them all the same color as my pickup. And in those days, we dumped cotton in the 30-foot cotton trailers. And as machines got more sophisticated, by this time I was running a 699 2-row John Deere, and we were running a couple of single rows along with it. I had traded the 220 International for the 699. So you had to keep buying more trailers to keep up with the cotton gin. At my highest point, I had 40 30-foot cotton trailers, and I was real proud because I'd go out, typical young kid, right? If my dad would have been around, he'd have said, you're spending money needlessly, but I wanted all the same kind of trailers. They were all Russell trailers built in Shafter, California. I would go to auctions and buy them used, bring them home, paint them all the same color, and I had a 77 Chevy pickup, buckskin, same color as the trailers that I pull into the gym. And I was telling somebody yesterday, thank God DOT wasn't as ornery in those days as it is today. I used to pull 2 30-footers with, if you're talking, you got 7 bales in each trailer, 2 30-footers to the cotton gin with a half-ton 77 Chevy. Never had any trouble. This is a picture of one of my cotton fields. Of course, I loved farming cotton, and my whole summer was devoted to getting everything I could out of an acre. I was very proud of this. This probably would have been about in those days, a 2 3/4 bale per acre average. And we grew upland cotton, Kayla, upland cotton. There's the pickup I was talking about that had a 454 in it. And it was amazing what that truck could pull. This is the fella on the right is Salvador Oliveira. He started with me early on, stayed with me until he retired, passed away a few years later. The fella on the left, he was a transfer student from Italy, and he was full of vinegar. And we had him. He said he wanted to come out here and experience cotton, and we had him in the trailers chopping cotton. And up until noon, he had a lot of energy. By noon, he wilted pretty well. Anyway, it was a fun harvest season having him around. This is the last IH tractor we had left on the ranch. That was an International 330. In high school, after high school, I spent so many hours driving this thing. We raked hay with it, we knocked in ditches with it, and for a time I grew black-eyed beans. They tell me peas are when you harvest black eyes green, and beans when you harvest them dry. We would run these knives. As a matter of fact, I just recently obtained a 806 with a bean cutter, that I've posted on Red Power. But anyway, behind that, we would come in with a number 10 3-point power takeoff basket, international basket rate. And on that tractor with it spread out. And we'd run behind the bean cutter and windrow those black eye beans before they got too dry and fell out of pods. That tractor I wish I'd have kept. Well, all that stuff I wish I would have kept. I had to go buy all my restorations back. By the way, see that disc right there? Max may recognize it. That's, I believe, a number 25 or 26 IHV offset disc. And that was purchased with the 560 that we had. And I had painted it green to match the 4020. So that is an IH right there. Some more cotton fields, different year. In 1980, I built this pole barn on the ranch. I used to grow a lot of hay, and it always seemed like when I had better crops of hay to sell, that the market would go kaput. And of course, the dairyman knew that I had to get rid of that hay before winter came, or else I had to go out, buy or rent a lot of covers to cover it. So I built a pole barn to store the hay in over winter, and they always said the best market for hay, storing hay in the winter, was to sell it in January and get rid of it before February, before Valentine's Day. So I thought, okay, I'll build a pole barn, put it in there. I only put hay in it one time. After that, it just seemed like the presence of the barn was enough to stir the market a little bit. And when people would come over, they'd say, well, I said, well, that's okay, I got the barn. And they'd call me a day later and say, okay, we'll take it. So that barn wound up in an almond storage barn in later years, which we'll get to here. Back in the 80s, I'm sure you guys know these Herbies. When the Herbies came out, we had a guy in a little community up the road that made the trailer and a tank and set up this big red on a Herbie. And we could go out with Roundup and clean the ends and do the ditches and even in the almonds spray the centers with the Herbie. This was a demonstrator, and I wound up keeping it. There's another picture of the cotton trailers on the off season, and one of my 2 rakes at the time. This picture, also 1980. That was my house at the time. My ranch. This was the southern part of the ranch, and it went north from there. But if you look closely here, see those little sticks? Those are almonds. These furrows here, the rows actually ran this way, east and west. This is north and south like this. But we had just planted this field to almonds, which was the 3rd block of almonds I ever planted in my life. Almonds were relatively new in the area, and those trees are still on the ranch. I sold the ranch a year ago, April. They're still on the ranch. They're still producing. This is one of the harvests. This is the way we dumped in the trailers. There's Ramon, and this is my son, Ken. After school, he would come out and trump trailers for us. This picture is one of my hay fields. If you look closely here, there's a bi-week crop duster coming through there. And a local crop duster, Kenny Lane, spraying for worms. This is the off season in the yard when I subsequently bought another $6.99. Those were not the fastest pickers in the world, but they were bulletproof. This, I believe, was 1984, and I decided that we needed a service truck for the cotton pickers. So I bought, this was a Caltrans truck, 1966, had it painted, put a toolbox on it, and put the compressor, and then we would carry water, diesel, oil, grease, everything out to the pickers. This is the start of a field here. This one might have been 3-reel cotton. That's what we always shot for. Now, earlier I talked about the 80s. And this, we irrigate in California. Irrigation is very important. And the more level the ground is, the easier it is to irrigate, the more efficient, less power, and all that. Well, going back to the 80s, during the PIC program, I don't know how many of you fellas remember the PIC program, but there was a PIC program for cotton. I was fortunate enough to bid in the PIC program, and I was told I had to leave my cotton acreage idle, and instead I got PIC certificates. Well, I asked myself what I was doing. I thought I was going broke in the 80s anyway, but I felt I had an opportunity. So I took my PIC money and started leveling some of my most unleveled fields. Out here is the big cat scraper, and we can get a little better pictures here. Here's a ditch. This was an 80 here, and I was doing 40 acres of cotton back, 40 acres of hay in the front, and we were running ditches and siphon pipes and what have you here, and just a lot of labor with the irrigation. We'll come back to that. Some more harvest pictures. Here we are in that same field. That's my son there. We were checking some grades and what have you. I think, and then, well, some more of the scraping here. There's the pole barn being used for storage, equipment storage mainly. Cotton trailers here. A lot of times we put supplies and what have you in it. That happens to be soil sulfur. Cotton loves soil sulfur, and especially that ground was reclaimed alkali. So the more sulfur you threw at it, the better it liked it. This gives you an idea of the cut we had. That's about a 3.5 foot cut, and it took me a while to get that ground back producing, but didn't take long. Put it in alfalfa and use manure and what have you, deep rooting, and we got it back. This is one of my cotton fields. This fella here is a young fella. He had a master's in agronomy, and he helped me. He was my PCA, helped me tremendously with my cotton, my crops, and also helped me when I transitioned into almonds. I was pretty proud of that in those days. You know, you had to go to the gym and feel like you had a little bit of class. These were our gyms in the area. Off-season, pickers and the trainers. Before we get to that, see that on the front of that trailer there? We got in a situation where the pink bollworm was invading California from Arizona, And the only way to eradicate it was through cleanliness and trying to keep scraps of cotton, etc. When we transport these trailers from the field to the gym, a lot of times strands of cotton will blow out the top. Well, the USDA came along and said, hey, we got to keep this loose cotton off the side of the road. So we wound up putting a flat piece of metal in front, and then we would put the tarp there and tarp the trailers. Then in '73, I started to move into almonds. I could see the handwriting on the wall that row crop in California was going to soon disappear. And in California, you either had dairy, you farmed cotton, or you farmed a raisin vineyard. And in those days, and I didn't want to do the cows, and I didn't like the raisin vineyards. So I thought, well, what am I going to get for the future? And I searched around and came up with almonds. It was a learning curve, a tremendous learning curve. But here, what we're doing, this is a young field that is blooming, and I had the big idea that we're going to play with Mother Nature. And we had the bees out there, weather was good, and we said, why don't we fly artificial pollen on there? It really wasn't artificial. What they would do is they would go shape a blooming orchard, gather the pollen, and then put it in the airplane and fly it over the top of a blooming orchard, trying to see if we could get a better cross-pollination. I did that several years. The non-pollinated ones, or the non-artificial pollinated ones, didn't even do it as well as, did better than the ones that were flown. So that was the end of that experiment. But yeah, you try to get an extra pound out of the deal. More cotton fields. Here's what it looked like at the cotton gin. The cotton gin was 40 acres, and at the height of the season, there would be trailers lined up, row after row after row. I would imagine sounds a lot like the stories I hear at the grain elevator, where the trucks are lined up, or used to be lined up for miles. And then, of course, farmers being farmers, everybody tried to figure out a way they can snatch their trailer, get it up to the front quicker than the next guy. So there would be arguments at the gin office. Nothing new. This is when I was going into the almonds, that field I showed you earlier. These are the young trees. You can barely see the sticks down the center here. But me and I had no money, and I had all the almond equipment. The cotton equipment. Planted 4 rows of trees in between. 4 rows of cotton in between. And they don't do that today. And even back then they said, oh, you don't want to do that. You damage the trees, you do this, you do that. I had no choice, I had to do it. This, don't laugh, that's a homemade cotton sprayer. And there was a fella in Kerman, his name was Dave Martin, passed away now, but he built 4 of these in his shop. They looked, if you walked up to them, you would say they're a death trap, they don't run. This man was in such demand to spray and defoliate cotton. That old junk looking stuff would never break down. The gallonage always came out right, and especially in a defoliation situation, it was phenomenal. Everybody got defoliated. I used him until I was out of the cotton business. He was tremendous. And the engines he used on there, he had the old Ford flathead V8s and some old transmission that he put in there and old truck rear ends. They were phenomenal. This is when I bought my 4440 and 15-foot bush hog, and that's Ramon. He was real happy now he had a cab tractor. There again, there's my 330 that I wish I'd hung on to. A lot of hours on that tractor. When we went into almonds, this is the equipment. This is my very first almond shaker. Is what they call a mono boom. The boom goes out, does this, does that, and it clamps the trunk of the tree and shakes the nuts to the ground. Now they have what they call the side shooters, where you can computerize it, go down the middle, and the machine on its own will stop at the tree and send the shaker out and clamp the trunk, and you can adjust the time you want in shape. This is my pickup machine. I had two of them. They were self-propelled. They were called Weiss McNairs, and Weiss sometimes painted them orange and sometimes painted them blue, but their trademark color was blue. The reason they paint them orange, they had bought out a company by the name of Rainmaker, and they were trying to keep the Rainmaker customers happy, so they painted them orange for the Rainmaker customers. Now, an almond would generally last, it used to be, it would last 25 to 30 years. Now, they're pushing them a lot harder, much like dairy cows. You know, the name of the game is get them in the barn, push them hard, get them out the door. Well, they're doing that with almonds now. You got closer plantings, denser plantings, different nutrition, and most of the guys are growing for 18 to 22 years, where when I planted them, we were trying to go 30. But anyway, when your orchard gets old, this is what you do. This is not the fun part of it. You push them over and you stack them, and if you're willing to give the EPA in California $500 an acre, you can burn them. It's funny how if you burn those without $500, you ruin the environment. But if you burn them after paying $500 an acre, it's okay. It's really amazing how that happens. But basically what we do is we let them sit in the windrow once we push them over. We let them dry. Then we push them into piles. And there's big tub grinders that come in. They grind them for chips to take them to the cogen plants. There's that little H I was telling you about that came from Kansas. That's our first restoration right there. And this is my two employees. This is Sal Oliveira, which is Ramon's son. And this is Sal Oliveira Jr., which was Ramon's grandson. So I've had 3 generations working with me. But I believe we were going to our first California Antique Show with the old H. These are some of the funny tractors that we use in almond farming. I was trying out this one, didn't like it, too narrow. I wound up with this one. Don't like it either, but it makes one heck of a good orchard tractor. The reason I don't like it is it's not green or red. But that oscillating front axle is wonderful when you come to the end of the road and swing it back. And it fits in the orchard just perfectly. These are some more shakers. This is another brand. We went with the OMC. This shaker is called an Orchard Right, and we were demonstrating both. We set it on the element. Get back to the collecting days. The very first, and it's too bad Ben Trompiani was sitting here. I think he got it. The very second Red Power Roundup I went to was in Bloomsburg, and watching RFD and all the rest of that, this Darius Harms was bigger than life, and so I wanted to meet him. And so I get to Bloomsburg, said I'm green to these Red Power things, feeling intimidated, and I go up to the chapter table and I ask, is Darius Harms around? I said, yeah, he's outside, we'll get him. He comes in and he had never met him. Shook his hand, I told him I'm watching on RFD and I really wanted to meet him, admired him and all this good stuff. And then we got talking about Max Armstrong. And I said, is Max here? I said, God, I'd love to meet him. And Darius said, pulls his phone out of his pocket, had Max on speed dial, and he throws the phone at me, and it rings, Max answers, and he goes, hey Max, I got a fellow here from California who wants to talk to you. And he throws me the phone, you could see that look on my face, I'm going, oh heck, what do I say? And but I had a good conversation with Max, and I'm so fortunate I got to meet Darius Harms. This was one of the restoration, well actually this was a friend of mine, John Martin from Tulare, and he was restoring a farmland LP, and he was teaching his young boys how to do it. Earlier I talked about the ditches that we had to do for cotton irrigation. There's the V we used. It had a tilt pitch or flatter, and you'd make 2 passes, make the ditch. You'd use siphon pipes to irrigate, which they were no fun. They were a double bend pipe, and you put it in the ditch, and if you were good at it, with one hand you could prime it, throw it down, and the water would start running down the furrow. I hated those darn things because 110 degrees, and you had to pick up a bundle of them, move them to the next set when the water got down to the end. That's why I couldn't wait to level the ground and get underground concrete pipeline in, and that way we were able to make sets with valves. But and in cotton in my area, we irrigated 14 times a year. So in the early part, May through July, we'd irrigate, knock the ditch down, go in, cultivate, spray, do whatever you had to do, put the ditch right back up, start the water again. It was in the heat, it was every 7 days we were flushing water down those furrows. This was my hay baler when matter of fact, when I stopped growing hay. I stopped growing cotton in 1998. I stopped alfalfa in 2000. So this is the baler I was using, a New Holland 290 3-wire, and with the Wisconsin engine. These were my hay rakes at the time. 2 left John Deere pulled with a tool bar, and we grew our hay in checks, what we call checks. You had 11, in my case, 11 every 52 feet. And the reason for the 52 feet was the swather fit in there the best. The swather would go down, and up, and you'd have 4 windrows in a check. And then you'd come back with this, bring 2 windrows into one, and so from 4 you'd have 2, and then the baler would bale the 2. They have much more sophisticated double rakes these days, all hydraulic and everything else. That was my last hay field that we cut, and it had to be in the fall of the year. Cotton was already starting to open. You can see here the valves for the pipelines. That was the last field I baled. That was the last of my hay career there. I was talking about the pipelines, what have you. We had a canal alongside of this field that would bring us surface water. And there was always weeds, there was always debris in the canal, gophers, you name it. We finally put in a line and buried that line, and it just cleans up everything so much better. This is what the canal looked like in the fall when we quit irrigating. At that time, this is going back a ways. No, this is 77. This was the next pickup, 88 Chevy. I put 350,000 miles on this engine and on this pickup, and I hated it when I traded it in. But the body was falling apart, but the engine was still going good. I had a lot of good times in that truck. Here's that pipeline we're putting in. We use lift pumps to suck water out of the pipeline when it's coming, when the surface water is being delivered, and the lift pumps keep the flow steady, so you don't have this up and down. And so here we are, we're connecting to the lift pump. This is the field the following year once that canal was piped. So it cleaned it up pretty good. Some more canals in. There's after a different angle of the lift pump, PG&E service, and pipeline going in. This is, I mentioned that Weisman there had blue and orange. This is the very first self-propel that I bought. And this is a sweeper, almond sweeper. And what it is the almond shaker puts it on the ground. The sweeper comes in, blows it away from the berm, and windrows it to the center of the middle. And then the pickup machine comes in, picks it up, blows the leaves, debris out, puts it in the cart, and then you have a shuttle cart that runs up behind here, and this is hydraulically controlled, and it dumps the almonds into the shuttle cart. Shuttle cart takes it to the truck. A smaller scale of corn harvesting, really. I watch big equipment and corn harvest, and I think the almond stuff is miniature corn harvest stuff. And that's it there. That was my early life. My later life was all almonds, and now back to IH, and the John Deeres are parked in the yards for memories, but the IH are in the shed. And because of the IH, I've met so many good people. I've been to, Carol and I were arguing how many roundups I've been to. I think this is the ninth roundup, and then I went to Half Century Progress last year. If you've never been to that, highly recommend it. It's wonderful. I've met so many. I was always a Midwest wannabe anyway, but the closest I could get to the Midwest was reading about it in Farm Journal or tractor magazines. And so when I retired, my bucket list was, we're getting a motorhome. I said, I don't want to fly to the Midwest. I want to drive to the Midwest. And it's not flyover country, it's beautiful country with beautiful people. And loved every minute of it. And IH, that picker, And that old formal age gave me the roots for this. Feel free to come up and look at these pictures. These are cotton picker pictures here. In here, I have, this binder belonged to Floyd Boyd, who was part owner of Allied Equipment. And this was his, and he had kept copies of the newsletters to the growers. And these go from, I believe it's 1949 to 1960. And you look through them, and you see the advertisements, and you see the pictures of the growers that had just bought a new tractor, and they were being highlighted. And you see the advertisements for cotton traders or single-row cotton pickers. It's really amazing how far we've come. The other thing I notice in here, just as a side, every month they highlighted a prominent lady in the community in a swimsuit. And they would say, this is so-and-so, she was made of this or made of that. And they highlight her in a swimsuit. And I sit there and I read that and I go, I don't think they get away with this today. We all love the ladies, they're beautiful. But I thought how innocent it was in those days, and today they would probably have gotten shut down. Not that it's lewd or anything, it's just the way it's presented. So you might want to look through there and see some of that stuff. Anybody have questions? I'm sure I've put most of you to sleep, and I know it's hot in here. Any questions?
What percent of the price of this box there? 2-row, single-row?
That's $6.99. The first one I bought, it was 2 years old. I bought it used, paid $19,000 for it. I wanted a 9900 because the $6.99 was hydrostat, and a 9900 also. But the 9900 had aluminum bars and moved faster to the field. A new 9900 in 1974 was $33,000. And I remember thinking, holy smokes. And so I settled on the $6.99s for $19,000. International was about the same price. They've always run neck and neck. Today a cotton picker is short of $1 million. And the cotton price hasn't changed that much. I was talking with somebody out here, and they were saying that back years ago it was 82 cents. And when we went to the gym, the fellow at the gym said the spot market was 82 cents. And, I know where they came from. It was Randy. He was giving us a little seminar out there. And somebody asked, well, how in the world can you pay for that thing? The only way you can do it is the productivity in the cotton seed and the fields. If I would make 3 bales, I thought I was really doing well. Today, they're making 3, 4, 5 bales to the acre. The machine, we ran 2 machines there, we're picking 4 rows. You have double the men, double the engines. One of those now, they pick, I believe it's 6 rows, and they bale the cotton. You don't need the trailers anymore. You don't need labor to take it to the chin. So I guess it's economies of scale. But it would be scary to go buy a $900,000 cotton picker at 82 cents today. And I think that's why we see more contractors out in our area. Very few, some will buy used pickers, but very few people buy their own new pickers. They hire Joe, contractor down here, who gets new ones every other year, and they get the cotton picker, they're on their way. I'm sorry we had green up here. You could beat me up for it, but that was the best I could do. I like to tell people when we had the red, We didn't have 2 cents to rub together, and we might have had a camera, but we couldn't afford film for it. And so it was until later in life that we had the time and the wherewithal to take pictures. So anyway, thank you for coming. It's been wonderful these last few days here, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow.